Hey, welcome to Dream Aloud with Kendra. It's a podcast for Black women who want to live limitless lives. Be inspired by others who have dared to step outside of their comfort zone to live their hopes and dreams and passions. Now let's get started because life is way too short not to live the way that you want.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again for my Dream Aloud with Kendra podcast and live stream. Usually we do a second act of phenomenal women who pivot, but today it's a little different. Not that my guest has not made many pivots, and we'll talk about that, but this is a Juneteenth special. And we are in a mastermind together. And I was telling everybody that I'm starting to do this Juneteenth countdown, 20 days to Juneteenth. And where in 1865, the Juneteenth was about a physical freedom. For 2021, I wanted people to start thinking more about that mental freedom. What does the new thing for us look like? Get out of the traditions, out of the norm. What does the new norm look like? What does freedom of your mind, freedom of your choices, freedom of finances? I want people to just look at things from a different angle, from a different perspective. So my guest, Dr. Roberta Wilborn, she is the president and co-founder of Wilborn and Associates and the host of a podcast entitled, give me the title again so I won't mess it up.
Okay, so it is a cup of culture and a taste of diversity. And right now it is a live stream that I do through Facebook, but it will be transitioning to a podcast in the very near future.
Okay, great. So I am so glad that she joined me. We had a conversation. She said, I do a lot of things for Juneteenth. We should do something together. And I jumped at the chance. Mm-hmm. And I inboxed her and we had a great conversation. And I said, I have to have you on my podcast and live stream because that's the kind of stuff that I talk about. The word resilient just keeps coming up. And so, in everything that I do, I always think about the resilience of our people. And so I wanted to have you on to just give us a little bit of your background before we go into the Juneteenth conversation so that everybody knows who you are and what you do and how you came to be the cultural awareness person that you are.
Well, that's a good question. So I recently retired from higher education after 35 years as a professor and an administrator. And when I started in higher ed, I started with this kind of dual role with administration and faculty and continued on. My background started in special education. And so when we're talking about special education, that's really where I got the whole notion of inclusion. And it was before the term was really popular. Mm-hmm. And I really had a heart for marginalized children. But then, of course, I expanded it to other groups. But it also started with my personal story and my personal background. Growing up in New York, and New York was considered a melting pot back then, where everyone was supposed to melt together, and we were all Americans, and that was just wonderful. And my dad would always tell me about how racism, the racism he went through as a person in the Navy and all of those kinds of things. And I was like, oh yeah, Dad, that was then, that doesn't exist anymore. And that was what I felt until 6th grade. when the reality hit me, when I was first faced with my first experience with racism, when I was being bused from one part of the town to the other because it was the beginning of busing. And the busing in New York was not getting on the little yellow school bus. It was riding two buses and trains when I was in sixth grade. And so that was just some major kinds of things. And of course, as African American parents, they could not, particularly back then, afford to take off from work to go with school, take their kids to school. It just didn't happen. And in New York, you just really wasn't driving a whole lot anyway, because it was just too much stuff. The transportation was bad. And so, dad would say, okay, here's the weekend. I'm gonna show you this route. And hey, after that, you're on your own. And I was like, oh, okay, ooh, scary, scary. But fortunately, there was other students who were going at the same time. So we all went. And it was going really well. And we had our little routine, and our last, so we did two buses, then we did our train. And when we got off the train in New York, I mean, if you've ever been to New York, there's always a newsstand or whatever. And when we got off at the newsstand, we always stopped at the newsstand, of course, because as kids, being kids, we had to buy candy and snacks and junk to take to school. And so that's what it was our routine. And so this particular morning, there was as I was standing in the line, there was an elderly white lady standing in front of me, and she dropped her changed. And I just, as a reflex, bent down to pick it up to give it to her. And I was called the N-word and everything else except the child of God. It was just, oh my God, I could not believe it, because I had never experienced racism or any kind of attack. I have had, kids from other backgrounds who I had been interacting with, and thought that was quote unquote normal, and I was totally devastated. I didn't know what to do. And, all the other kids who I guess had been with me, they disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. But if you can imagine, I had to walk the rest of the way to school, just devastated, in tears and hurt. And then yet still I had to function going to school. And there was no school counselor who I could talk to, or no one who to help me to process this. And even, I'm a female in my 60s. And that is still that trauma is still very real. And I know
for
that
an adult to do that to
right to a sixth grader, and it was devastating. And so I guess that was the beginning of my journey and concern about racism and why it existed and why that hatred was there. But then also I grew up with Dr. Martin Luther King, seeing him on television, and watching how he was an educated Black man, one of the few educated Black men that was televised, that had a following, that was trying to make a difference. And he was a man of God. And so for him, I guess he became kind of my idol. And so his dream became my dream. And I embraced it, and I embraced the desire to continue to do that work. And I began to study and gain more interest and find out about other cultures and find out about my cultures, and then to teach others and find out about how we have not been told the truth. That, as an educator, I'm an educator.
Yes.
And our education books have been sanitized, and all of the important history has been taken out. And as a result of that, people don't have historical empathy, and they don't understand why Black people just can't get over it, and on all of these kinds of things. And I was like, no, this is not good. And then I have right now, before it was two, but now I have three grandsons. And when you think about all of the attacks on our Black men, our Black boys, it's a scary thing. And I feel that I have to do my part to make a difference. That whatever sphere of influence that we have, I think God has called us to make a difference. And so those are my whys. So my why is that, you know, I've got grandsons and I care about them and I want to make the world better for everybody, marginalized groups. And then because of my faith, I'm a person of faith, I'm a minister, but not only that is I am a 2-time breast cancer survivor.
All right.
And I don't believe that God would have me alive and well and thriving, okay, if he didn't have more work for me to do.
More work, exactly.
And so I've got to do the work.
Yes.
I've got to do the work
Yes.
because I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant.
Well done.
And so that's how I've got it. And so I have worked in all kinds of universities, historically Black colleges, white colleges. And for the last 14 years, I have been in a majority white university. And that has been an important transformation for me because it helped me see the other side. It helped me encounter these, and I dealt with graduate students, these graduate students who were adults, who were in professions, in education, who will tell me, I've never went to school with anyone that looked like you. I didn't grow up with people. I don't have a clue. And then I was taught to be colorblind. And I'm like, no, you
Colorblind.
don't need to be colorblind.
Let's start.
No.
I need to talk about this. I need to talk.
Yes.
Okay, so I grew up in a Black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a rural area, so my school was predominantly white.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was normal for the Black person to be one of maybe 2 or 3 in the class. And I knew I was the Black one, but we didn't feel singled out. I didn't feel all of that.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I graduated and I started working in East Brunswick at a hotel,
Mm-hmm.
I got to see all different types of people come through. And I started feeling that feeling that, there's a difference. There's that need for people to, I've never seen you before. They already have an idea of who you are. And I work in higher ed too. So, and it was in a Black neighborhood, but all of the leadership is white.
Of course.
All of the faculty in high places are white.
Yes,
most of the faculty are high. And so I got this I'm walking down hallways, I'm looking at people's thesis. And it's always about the people in the neighborhood. But the people in the neighborhood aren't in the classrooms. And so just from the outside looking in, but being in that circle, I got to see some of the prejudices that are there. Yes. And defensiveness when you point something out. And for me, I was the director. So what I did was I started taking diversity and inclusion classes just to figure out why I was being treated this way.
Right.
And like you said, we really are, everybody needs to take up the fight.
Yes.
Not just people of color.
Absolutely.
And every time I show up in a diversity and inclusion course, facilitation group, whatever it is, it's always women and Black men, and maybe a sprinkling of men of a different color, but you never see white men there. Ever.
Really?
They don't need to be there.
Well, I have seen white men there, and so I guess that's a difference. Okay. Especially because in Spokane, where I am, we're only like 2.5% now. It used to be when I came there, 1.9%. 2.5% of the population is people of color. Okay, so I'm talking about living in a white world. Okay, and so yes, there, we have white men, but of course, sometimes you're preaching to the choir, because if they're there, they already have a certain awareness or wokeness, as we like to say these days, but they still, in many cases, don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Right. And so the fact that people say, I don't see color or I'm colorblind, that is not a good thing.
It is not a good thing, but that is what they have been taught. And so it's about dispelling the myth and helping them to understand why. And so I say, hey, I know you see my color. You see that I am a Black female.
Exactly.
And let me tell you, when you tell me that you don't see color, that you don't see my color, let me tell you why I'm offended by that. Because you are denying a part of who I am.
Yes.
And I fully embrace my my Africanity.
Yes.
I am proud to have African ancestry. I'm proud. I say I grew up in, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. Yes, that is me. Okay.
Yes.
And so you don't want to say that. And yes, I understand it was not acceptable for you to have race conversations.
Right.
That was then. This is now.
And you need to have the conversation.
We need to talk about these. And if you have questions, let's do it.
And also, I believe that when you say I'm colorblind or I don't see color, that also says do it my way. My way is the right way.
The right way.
Now, see,
that ethnocentricity, you know that.
And it was great for me because I'm a rule follower. So I went through school being a teacher's pet, being all of these things because I'm a rule follower. And so therefore, they probably didn't see my color and I didn't need them to see my color. I was just a good student. However, as a mother of a non-rule follower, I was able to see the other side, the prejudice. And when I say prejudice, I'm talking about the prejudgment of expectation because you didn't follow the rules.
Right.
So for them, it may not say, it may not be that, okay, this person is not white or they're Black or whatever. But when someone doesn't follow the rules, it could be a cultural thing.
Yes.
But
absolutely.
Because you don't see color and you don't
even take that into consideration.
Exactly. And you did not see that your way and your rules is based in your culture, which says do it my way. And the only time you see color is when people don't do it your way. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not your way.
Right.
And so that's the thing that bothers me the most when people say they're colorblind. Because it's still this system I've deemed is the right way. And it has nothing to do with your culture. But as long as you stay in those lines, everything is fine.
Right. And it's something that I said way back when I was doing special ed, is that different does not equal a deficit. Just because something is different does not mean that those who are different are defective in some kind of way, that they're lacking or they're not worthy. Different is just different. You know, and we have to learn to have a greater sense of appreciation of that differentness. And now, particularly, you know, in colleges and universities, and all the research is showing that when you have a more diverse group, you have, in businesses, you have greater innovation. You have greater ideas and creativity. All of those things are extremely important. And so it's really necessary for us to get over this. We can't talk about it, or I don't want to accept your difference.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't have said it any better. So I'm a lover of quotes. and phrases. So I've written down different doesn't mean deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be using that. So I'll give you credit, but
That's okay. No cut. That's okay. Quote me.
so let's get into the Juneteenth celebration.
Okay.
Or how Juneteenth came about. Because when I was growing up, we didn't celebrate Juneteenth. As I got older, I realized it was something that was done in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we really didn't celebrate then either. I just felt like, well, if you guys didn't know you were free, then I learned the story that people fled to Texas because they didn't have to follow the rules. There wasn't a lot of Union troops there, so they could do what they wanted to do. And in changing my thinking, I know now that no one is free until we're all free.
Exactly.
And that has nothing to do with the color of your skin. So whenever you see someone who is being oppressed, then that means we're all oppressed.
Yes.
So let's talk about the history of.
Oh, sure. Let me do my quote.
Do your quote.
Because it ties in right to that.
Do your quote.
It's an MLK quote.
Okay.
And he said that all mankind is tied together. All life is interrelated, and we are all caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of identity. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly, which is exactly what you saying.
Yes.
One can't be free and the other one's not free.
Right.
It's going to have a ripple effect. We're all connected.
Mm-hmm. And if the pandemic showed us nothing else,
yes,
it showed us that it wasn't just an issue over in Asia.
Right.
It affected us all.
Yes, and it's still affecting us all, and it's still affecting Black and brown people disproportionate to other groups.
It's showing,
and that's the problem.
It's showing all of the underlying issues that have been covered and not talked about.
Yes. Okay. So Juneteenth.
Yes, ma'am.
So Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom. Freedom, or shall we say emancipation? Because people, when President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation that, quote unquote, freed slaves, it did not free all slaves.
Nope.
It freed some slaves. Okay. Because Texas likes to be the exception to the rule, particularly when it comes to issues of race and discrimination. I mean, you can even see that today, unfortunately, where Texas is still proud to be the leaders in bucking the system in terms of voting rights and voter suppression and all of those kinds of things. A while back they were talking about seceding and all of this kind of stuff. And if you look at their textbooks, they want to take all this stuff out. So
they're consistent.
They are consistent. So back then, when President Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865.
1863.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for helping me with my timeline, because I did not write down. I was like, oh shoot, I did not write that down. Okay, write those dates down. For some reason, the message did not get to Texas. Okay, now Okay, there's a lot of reasons why they say that the message did not get to Texas, but the message did not get to Texas. So just think about this. On this country, now slavery has been outlawed.
But only for the Confederate states.
States,
So
right.
the Union states, they did not have to relinquish their slaves because they were on the side of the signer of the Emancipation. Okay, I just need to make that clear. It was only for the Confederate states.
Yes, 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 yes. And so as a result, you have this pocket of people who still were not going to get the message and didn't want the message to come across. So one of the reasons was they said that they wanted to have an extra season for the cotton to grow. You know, they just needed a little bit more time to get that last crop in while they had the slaves. Because, you know, of course, they couldn't pick it themselves. You know, it's just, you know, too.
Or planted. They didn't know how.
Right, right. They didn't know how to do those things. Then the other one was that the message actually, the person who was delivering the message got killed along the way. I mean, so there are a lot of stories as to why the message did not get to Texas. But nevertheless, it didn't happen until General Granger finally was able to come to Texas himself.
2.5 years later.
2.5 years later. To tell and say, and brought the proclamation and say, look, this is the case. They're free. They're free. And that was on June 19th. And so that was why we celebrate Juneteenth and why African Americans will say the 4th of July is not our Independence Day.
Yeah.
It's not our Independence Day. Now we can celebrate it. You know, we can celebrate it. But when you're looking at the truth of why we do what we do and why we focus on Juneteenth, that's why. But unfortunately, it's something that has been hidden. And I talk a lot about history being sanitized, or other people like to say whitewash. Our history has been whitewashed, or things have been, well, we know it's been taken out, omitted. And, you know, I love the African proverb that talks about until the lion has its historian, the hunter will always be glorified.
Yes.
Meaning that whoever has the power of the narrative can tell and create the story that they want to.
So that is my entire theme for everything that I do, for family reunions, for groups. It is learning your lineage, learning your history, and making sure you pass it down. Because until the lion learns to write,
exactly,
the story will always glorify the hunter. I tell that all the time. And in my Juneteenth countdown, all I'm doing is let's take control of the narrative. Tell your story and put your truth in it. So much has been taken out. You know, so much going on. So I'm watching, you know, high off the hog. All of the food. Now, I always knew about the peas and the rice. And that's a West African meal, whether you're Caribbean, whether you're in North America, or on the continent of the motherland, you know that there's rice and there are peas. However, all of the other things that I'm learning, that we have created the entire cuisine here. Not just Southern cooking, not just what you deem soul food. We've created almost all of the cuisine
Right.
here. We've built this, and I'm so glad that people are starting to realize that you can trace things back by food. You can
Right.
trace them back by story, by profession, and all you ever see is resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see the Juneteenth celebration, because the freedmen
Mm-hmm.
of 1865, immediately the year after that, began celebrating Jubilee Day,
Right. Right.
that
Mm-hmm.
freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you're faster. So in the Bible, the year of Jubilee is
It's a
everything
freedom. Mm-hmm.
it's a freedom, you start again.
Mm-hmm.
And they began to have family reunions that year, because don't forget, people were sold away.
Right.
So if I can find my family, that's the real reunion, because you were
Right.
sold away. If I was able to find you and get and come back, bring you back
Mm-hmm.
to the
Mm-hmm.
fold, I'm able to do that now because I'm a freedman.
Exactly, exactly. And that's so awesome. And, I really applaud you for what you're doing in terms of focusing on family reunions and helping people to get their stories out, because that is so critical. Because so much of our history has been lost in those connections, and those family connections are extremely important.
So if somebody wants to celebrate, I know you have a Juneteenth celebration.
Well, we normally in Spokane, it's very interesting. Well, I actually found out about Juneteenth um, when I married my husband, who lived in Arkansas. Okay, because I'm New York. New York, we weren't really celebrating, especially back in the day, Juneteenth. And then I went to school in Massachusetts and all this stuff. It was white schools. They weren't celebrating Juneteenth. Okay, so
Exactly.
I didn't find out about it until I married my husband, who's of course also very Afrocentric and was just very much into it. And in Memphis, they always had Juneteenth celebrations and parades and those kinds of things. And so so we're talking about, it was my 40s or whatever before I ever found out about Juneteenth. I was like, that is crazy. That is
I
crazy.
heard about it, but I thought about if they didn't find out for 2.5 years, that is not my problem. And that's a horrible way to think about it.
Mm-hmm,
We need
mm-hmm.
to change our mindset.
Right. And it is about changing mindsets, and it's about education, because that's the way you change mindsets. It's through education, and it's about awareness. And so in the South, when I lived in the South, it was a normal part of a way of life. Okay. So when I moved to the inland Northwest on the other side of the country, to Spokane, little Spokane, Washington, um, there were some younger Black folks who well, no, let's see. There were some ministers who started doing Juneteenth celebrations. And so we always had a Juneteenth celebration in the park. And everyone would come and bring foods, and it was like a big family reunion. And it was, and we'd have choirs sing, and everyone would just pick in. But of course, as the elders gaining age, they didn't necessarily have the energy. So then some younger people began taking it over, and they created the Juneteenth an organization, a nonprofit actually, to focus on
Full
that. And
organization.
so I would, my husband and I would work with them on that. And then my husband and I also had a radio program for like 7.5 years. And so, which was about cultures, of course, and so we would always talk about it. And because it was not necessarily, like you said, not just educating us, but educating everyone about
Everyone.
this.
It's a
And so
positive thing.
that was really, really important. And so this year, because we were traveling to see our new grandson, we were kind of like, well, we're not going to be there to be involved in it, but because we are known in our community
Mm-hmm.
for the work that we do, the public library contacted my husband and I and said, would you do a Juneteenth presentation for the library that we can publicize a virtual presentation? So that's what we're going to be doing. On the 17th, we will be doing a Juneteenth celebration, and it's called June what? You know, why African Americans celebrate Juneteenth?
Now,
Because
can anyone attend?
absolutely. And I'll have the link, give you the link so you can put them in your show notes
Okay.
about how they can access it, because it definitely, it will be a video presentation, but it will be live streamed.
Okay. And it
And
will be June 17th.
June 17th.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'll have time to post.
Yes. Yes. So yes, that's Thursday. Yeah, yeah. So it is going to be on that Thursday before Juneteenth, because the library wanted to get it out so that people knew about it beforehand. So if they wanted to actually participate in some of the Juneteenth celebrations that are going to be going on that weekend, they would know what it's all about.
You know what it's about. So if
Yes.
you're interested in learning more about Juneteenth, we will have the information for you. I'll post it in the link here so that you can tune in as well for Dr.
Yes. And then I also will be posting it on our website, which is www.wilburnassociates.org. And that's our website. So they can,
.org.
yes, and it's associates with an S, and it's Wilburn. And so it's just like it sounds, BURN, one L. Mm-hmm.
WILBUR.
BURN, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners about Juneteenth or anything else that has to do with cultural awareness? We've already talked about the color blindness piece, the defensiveness that you run up against when you speak about color blindness is not a good thing. And so we really just have to talk about that. So leading up to Juneteenth, what is one thing that we all can practice to even get better with our conversations with others? Because it's about all of us.
I think it's really important to get past defensiveness, because it's really easy to, well, defensiveness on one side and then anger on the other side. Okay, because if you're building intercultural communications, defensiveness, it just builds barriers. And what we want to do is we want to build bridges. Okay, and so in order to do that, instead of when someone says something that is really offensive to us, instead of getting angry and saying, you just racist, blah, 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 that's not going to help. That's not going to help. Ask the question. Can you explain to me why you think that? Can you tell me a little bit more about your perspective? Help me to understand, because I don't understand. And then when people do something that is offensive, tell them, that really offended me. Because many times people don't realize that they've offended you. And so then they're going to come back and they're going to be, you're just being too sensitive and all that stuff. No, I'm not being too sensitive, but let me explain why. So it takes a both and. Both parties have to be willing to have a conversation and put aside some of their feelings so that they can promote understanding. And that's what I'm about. I'm about helping people to build bridges and promote understanding between diverse groups so that they can excel in a diverse and inclusive world. You're not going to excel in a diverse and inclusive world. And that's what we're living in right now, being hostile, being angry, being fragile. And yes, white fragility is a reality, but we can't afford to be too fragile, and neither can you. But what we have to do is we
All
have to have that's right, we have to have a meeting of the minds.
yeah.
And it's like, help me to understand. Practice those words. Help me to understand why you're saying what you're saying. Help me to understand why you think. Just a situation. I worked with a young man. I had a young man in one of my classes who said to me, he said in a paper. Okay, so I'm teaching this class with a white woman. Okay, the class is predominantly white. There was a few people of color sprinkled in there, but predominantly. And in the paper, he says, I'm a racist and I have a problem with women. Okay. So I could have been really offended. I could have, you're getting out of my class, all of those kinds of things. But I said, we need to talk.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yes.
I always thank people for their honesty first.
Yeah. I say, let's talk. And so we set up an appointment and we talked. And do you know that for a year, he and I met like every other week to unpack what he was feeling. And it really wasn't that he was a racist, is that he grew up in a racist family.
It was the conditioning.
Yes. And he didn't know, okay, now I'm getting all this diversity training. What do I do with it? And how does that fit for me? And then how do I deal with my folks when I go back home? And so it was just really powerful to see just even the transformation and the willingness, just the willingness, because I was able to say to him, let's talk about that. I don't necessarily think that that's you, but why do you think that? And begin to explore those kinds of things and give new understandings. Let me help you see some things differently. Let me show you how you can approach conversations differently. Let me show you how you might want to approach your family differently. But and say, look, let's talk about some of the things that you're doing. You said you don't, like women, and you have a problem with me. Look how you're this kid, he would come and hug me, and I was like, no, you're not a racist. Racist ain't gonna do that things.
Yeah.
You are interacting with us as female instructors, but that's what
he had an awareness and the ability to say that.
Right.
That's how it starts.
Right.
We don't need people to be perfect. We don't want you to feel guilty. I think there's a lot of times you hear you want people to feel guilty. That's not what it's about.
Right.
We need you. We have to understand one another.
Right. Exactly.
And so, do you think that Juneteenth should be a federal holiday?
I do. Because it is an important day for all of us.
All of us.
All of us.
Yep.
And I am really happy to
anything in this country. It affects all of us.
Exactly, that interrelatedness. And I'm glad to see that some of the states are beginning to do that. And I do hope that it will happen on a federal level, because it's needed. And I'm gonna flip into this other thing, like the Tulsa.
Yeah.
That's another. There's so much that.
Another one just swept under the rug. This
That's right.
this past Monday was 100 years
Yes.
of
Yes.
the Greenwood massacre,
Right.
commemorating that massacre. They call it a
Right.
riot, but
But it was not
it,
a riot. It was a massacre.
it was a massacre. And then they dug a mass grave, threw everybody in it, and dared people to say anything. So for 75 years, there was silence, and the rest of the world never knew. So
Right.
over the last 25 years, we're just hearing the story.
Right.
And I challenge people to readjust their thinking again. Black Wall Street, Greenwood is not the only freedmen town.
Right.
There
Right. And it is not the only massacre.
It's not the only massacre. Now we've heard of Rosewood, but all of these towns have they've either been plundered, there's been massacres, or after the civil rights passed, we had no need to be in those freedmen towns. But they started in the late 18th century.
Yes.
So these were places where people could learn to grow and thrive and depend on one another. So let's think about this with the mindset. What do we believe? Well, what do we hear a lot? Black folks can't get together. They can't stick together. They can't work together. We've been working together forever.
Right.
Starting before these freedmen towns. But
Right.
here were former enslaved people started towns. There were at least 20 in Oklahoma alone. And all across the United States, and some weren't even states yet, they were territories.
Right.
And these freedmen towns were there, but we only hear of Greenwood,
Right.
Wall Street, and there's so many more.
Right. Right. Right.
Has not been told. The
Right.
lion needs a historian. The lion needs someone to document their story.
Right.
That's my whole thing. Just tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. And like you said, you didn't hear about Juneteenth for a long time. I was an adult when I figured out what Juneteenth was really about. I never thought I needed to celebrate until a few years ago.
That's right.
We change our thinking.
That's right. And so since you're talking about telling the story, so this is, although you can kind of see, it's my book. It's just out. Yeah, can you see that? Is that better? Okay. Ew, it's kind of, okay.
Make it matter.
Make it matter. And it says how to create a life of unforgettable impact and abundant fulfillment. And this is an anthology.
Okay.
It's an anthology of 17 Black authors.
Awesome.
17 Black authors. And I am so proud to be a part of this project. Okay. And so my story, part of my story is in here. But the thing that is exciting about it is that we need to realize that as Black people, that our lives matter, and we need to tell others that our lives matter, why it matters, and how we have learned to create a life of impact and abundant fulfillment, because we're doing it every single day.
For centuries.
For centuries.
So we have some watchers. So Trayshawn says that Juneteenth is a state holiday now in New Jersey.
Awesome.
And she felt so out of touch before too. So, so we just need to learn about it, and we need to perpetuate the story and tell it from our point of view.
That's right. That's right.
And so where can we get your book?
You can get it. I will say, I want you to get it from me because, and let me tell you this. Okay. It is on Amazon. Okay. And it is now, it's been a bestseller on Amazon.
Okay.
But the things that we need to support Black independent publishers. And so Ryan Green, oops, oh gosh, these little flashy things. I hate it when you
You
have
need
to
to
back
just
up.
hold it in front of you. There you go.
Okay, there we go. So Ryan Green, he is the publisher as well as the coordinator brain behind the project. He's an independent Black publisher. And so we need to support him. And we need to support us because, you know, we get next to nothing when we're going to Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you can get it from www.themakeitmatterproject.com
In front of you. Yeah. There you go.
.com/Roberta.
Okay.
And then I will get some credit too.
Okay.
And so we want to give our independent Black publishers more business than we give Amazon. And we know we all love our Amazon.
Yep.
But let's love our Black businesses and Black publishers as well. And that's something you can do for Juneteenth, is support a Black business, support a Black publisher, support a Black author. And the thing that also that I love about this project is that everyone in this project, we're all from different walks of life, from mothers to financial people. So you don't just get one perspective. And it shows you, regardless of what your profession is, you can all have an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And it should show you that we're not a monolith as well.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So I am so glad that you joined me. We have to do this again.
Yes, this is awesome.
I just love diversity and inclusion and unconditioning for everyone.
Yes.
Not just for other people, it's for us too. We've been conditioned.
Yes, we have.
To be unconditioned with the truth.
Yes.
And we need to understand that all people, no one is all bad or all good. And
exactly.
So we just need to embrace people. But first, we need to love ourselves.
Yes.
Tell our story and celebrate ourselves. We've been celebrating everybody else.
Right.
Celebrate ourselves. So I think the people, there's a lot of comments here, but we didn't get a chance to read them. My assistant is not well. I'm wearing yellow for Rebel. She is not feeling well at this point, but she's doing a lot better, and we know that she's going to have a full recovery. So to my cousin Muffin, who is also
Muffin, oh, that's so sweet.
Support, and she usually writes all the links in for me. I just want to say hi, and I'm wearing yellow for Team Rebel, and we're waiting for your speedy full recovery. Yes. And as we close, I always ask every guest, on whose shoulders do you stand? Because we did not get here alone.
No, oh my gosh. Well, I stand on the shoulders of so many people, but one is Robert Johnson. And that was my dad, who I was named after. And he had high hopes and high vision for me, and he pushed me as a child, even when I didn't want to be pushed. And I definitely stand on his shoulders. I stand on so many others. I stand on Michelle Obama. I stand on Barack Obama. I stand on Harriet Tubman. I stand on Sojourner Truth.
Stand on the ancestors.
I stand on Ya Asante Wa, an African warrior princess.
Yes.
So many. And another thing that I do, which I think is so important, is Kwanzaa. And what we see now is one of them is self-determination. That's what we have to have more of as Black people. Self-determination so that we can be all that God created us to be.
Yes, yes. So that is awesome. I thank you for joining us. I want to remind you all of Dr. Wilburn's suggestion. Support a Black business, an author, support someone Black for the Juneteenth day. That's for everybody. It's not just
Yes,
for us. It's for
that's
everybody.
right.
It's for everybody. And be mindful that you have to tell your story. If you don't,
Yes,
it's no one else's job, and it may not be their interest. And so our children and others will hear other people's stories, but not those of their own, their greatness, what's inside of them. So use all of your talents. I always tell people I'm a fan of the late Miles Monroe
mm-hmm.
about dying empty. So living fully,
Mm-hmm. But
using
dying.
all of your gifts and talents, walk in your purpose with passion, and die empty. Don't take it to the grave with you.
That's right.
So be all that you can be and do all that you can do, not only for yourself, but help others. And so I hope that you will pick up the book. I put the link in there, Make It Matter. I also hope that you will support a Black business and celebrate Juneteenth. Have a great night. I'm so glad you
Wonderful.
joined us and shared this video with a friend. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Dream Aloud with Kendra. If you like the show, leave a review and tell a friend. I also invite you to join our Dream Aloud Facebook group, where we encourage and challenge our members to step outside of their comfort zone and live limitless lives. I guarantee you will experience true fulfillment when you live, work, and play your way.